Hello and welcome back to Art for Everybody and to this last part of my series Drawing and Painting for Absolute Beginners. My name is Evi Steiner-Böhm. I'm an artist from Germany, and these two little figures here are my assistants Pedro and Rosa. And now let's get right into how to paint cubes. In our last video I showed you the most important things you have to know about drawing a cube. And today is basically about painting a cube. But so far, when we painted our spheres and cylinders, we always had one light source coming from one side, so that should be quite easy for you. And this is why today I would like to take you outside, where we have more than just one light source. I will explain what today is about using this little sketch I did last year, which I did in preparation for the large oil painting you just saw in the intro. It's the castle of my hometown, Sulzbach-Rosenberg in Bavaria, and this is what it looks from a distance. But I choose this side of the castle because here you have a good variation of all the light sources you can have when painting outside. Now let me put a photograph next to my painting so that it gets clearer for you what I mean. Okay, the main light source, of course, in this painting is the sunlight, which at this time of day, that was about 10 a.m. in the morning, is still fairly warm. And you can see the full sunlight on this wall of the building and on this wall of the building. And of course, on the cobblestones and on some of the clouds. The second light source is the sky and the clouds in the sky, depending on whether you have clouds or not. And you can see these reflections in the shadow parts of your buildings. So you can have the blues here, or you can have violets here, you can have grays here, all depending on what reflections come down here. But the most important light source when painting outside is the third one, and that's the challenging one. It's the reflections you have from the ground up to the buildings, or from other buildings to your buildings, or from the greens reflecting on your buildings. And from this light source, you can have all sorts of color touches, depending on the object it comes from. Now, our job as painters is to give our viewers an impression of what we see. And it doesn't have to look exactly like the photograph. It's all about what you feel, what you see, and what you want your viewers to see. So you can, of course, interpret the colors like the Impressionists did. You could even exaggerate or reinvent colors, as long in the end it's clear to the viewer what you want him to see. Now I will paint this little sketch for you again today so that you can see how I do it. And in the end I will let you watch some parts of the oil painting I did so that you can see why sketches like this one are really important as a preparation for big paintings as well. So I've already done the sketch on a grey carton, which I personally prefer for painting with acrylics. And I'm going to use a fairly limited palette. I'm going to use titanium white, cadmium yellow, crimson, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue and cyan. And as for the brushes you are going to need, you simply need a variation of bristle brushes or synthetic brushes for, the details. It's not very complicated at all. I'm going to start with the sky. And as we've already learned in landscape painting, things get paler and bluer in the distance, meaning the sky down here at the horizon is pale and it's cooler, and I'm going to use cyan for that. And the closer the sky gets to me, the warmer it gets. So up here I'm going to use a little ultramarine blue and white, of course. And in this case we also have the sun somewhere here, and here also the color gets paler because the sun takes away the color. So we have to add more white on this side as well. So I'm going to start with the blue sky above me. And make it just a little paler towards the sun. And the further down we get here, the more cyan I'm going to add and the more white I'm going to add. And the same on this side where the sun is. In the next step, I will block in the main areas of light and shadow. And that is the good thing about painting cubes, that they are very clearly defined. And also in the first layer, I'm going to exaggerate the colors. In the finished painting, this first layer then will shine through here, and it will give the whole painting a nice vibrating look. So I'm going to use a grayish bluish color for the two walls that are in more or less full shadow. And the one back here, because it's a little further away, can be a little paler and bluer. But also, since it's slightly turned towards the sun, it can also get a little warmer on the right side, meaning it can have maybe a little violet in it. The same about the wall of the front building on the right side here. And the more it turns towards the sun, the lighter it can get. And for my grayish bluish color, I can take the leftovers of the sky, and to make it gray you can either use the burnt sienna or you can use the cadmium yellow. As long as it's a very broken color, that's okay. I'm going to make it a little more violet because I want it to shine through. Okay. So now let's take care of the two walls in direct sunlight. They are white with a tiny touch of orange in it, but again in this first layer I'm going to exaggerate that so that the color will shimmer through the next layer I'm going to put on it. So this orange is simply a mixture of cadmium yellow and a little crimson. And now let's do the cobblestones, and for the lighter parts we can also use this sort of orangey color, but we're going to add a little blue in it as well, because they are a little darker than the walls in the bright sunlight. And you can also make this color fairly dark, because again we're going to paint over it with the lighter color, and this darker color adds to the contrast between light and dark, which has to be a lot stronger in the foreground. And here you can already vary the color, because the cobblestones vary a lot in color and in size, so that doesn't matter at all if it has different colors in it. But as a whole, they should be of a warmer color, because they are going to be in the sunlight. It can be a little paler up here because that's further away. And in the shadow, they are fairly dark. So again, we can exaggerate that in the first layer and make it really dark and sort of violet bluish again, like the walls of the buildings. With the roofs, it's fairly easy because we have 2 roofs in full sunlight and 2 of them in half shadow. That's easy to mix. And I simply mix my crimson with my yellow and add a little white for the ones in full sunlight, and for the ones in the half shadow we simply add a little ultramarine blue to cool it down a little. So the last important thing about the block-in stage is this wall here, which has a lot of reflected light from this wall and from the cobblestones on it. And I'm going to mix a sort of very light violet, almost yellowish color, which still has blue in it. It's a broken cool color, but fairly warm. And again, I'm going to paint over it with a much lighter color, where this color of the first layer will simply shimmer through. The very last thing I do in the block-in stage is to paint the grass, which we can see down here and in front of this building. And for the grass in the sunlight, I mix a very bright green from cadmium yellow and cyan. And it's still dark enough so that I can still put on sparkles of brighter greens using maybe white. I'll do that in the next layer. And for the darker green, I simply add ultramarine blue to my mixture. This was the most important part about the block-in stage. The windows and these little walls here are not that important. They are almost the same color as the cobblestones. I'll let you watch in time lapse. And after that, I will put on the second layer on all my walls and try to match the color that I see in them. And mind you, this is very important. The color that I see is not necessarily the color that you will see. So I can only give you the impression that I have, but that's what artists do. They give the impression that they have. So for the rest of the painting, I will let you watch time lapse. And when I'm done, we'll have a look at the finished painting together. This is how far I would take a sketch like this. You don't need more information if you want to do a bigger painting. Of course, if you want that to be a full painting, you would have to, add a lot more details. But for my purpose, that's okay as it is. So, as I said, this was the last part of my series for absolute beginners in drawing and painting. I hope you enjoyed the lessons. And I hope you will tune in again when we do more advanced paintings. And here now are some scenes from me painting the big oil painting from this sketch. Till the next time then, have a very good time. Bye bye.